Well, it's very nice to be back. I should tell you a little bit about our trip and everything. In fact, I called Italy and told them that my doctor had told me he didn't want me to travel. And I was talking to several people, and then our person who's responsible for public relations took the phone, not having heard that, what the doctor told me. She said, "We would love for you to come here to help launch the Italian translation of Conversations with Yogananda." So I said, "Fine, I'll be there." And so I did go. And it was a wonderful event. And somehow, although my body was not altogether happy with me for being dragged that long way, nonetheless, it all went fine. We had a hall for 500 people. And the hotel told us that this is vacation period. You'll be lucky to get 25 people. Well, we had reservations for 880, and the hotel manager said, "Oh, that's strictly not allowed. You're not allowed more than 500 people in the hall. The fire regulations don't allow it." And we said, "Well, what are we going to do?" He said, "Well," we'd made friends with him by this time. And he said, "Well, never mind, I'll be home, you don't have to tell me." So in fact, we had people standing all around the sides, and we had people sitting on the floor, and we managed to get that many people in. And they had many famous people introducing it, and it was a great event. And so my time in Italy was very successful. It was very nice to be back there. It's even nicer to be back here. But I don't like to make that comparison. It's just that I feel really at home here. The Italian people, well, now it's different, but 20, 25 years ago, it was not like India, where you find so many people who speak good English. There, they didn't speak any English. I remember a lecture I was giving at the Yoga Academy in Milan, and there was somebody translating me, and I was leading them in a meditation. I said, "Now, feel the peace. Sentite la pace." I said, "I've got to learn this blessed language. I can't have people translating me like that." So I did learn it, and I speak it well now, which I don't Hindi because you don't allow me to. I say something in Hindi, "Oh, you're learning." And so anyway, it's not just the country of my guru. It was something that we all felt, all four of us coming back as the plane landed on the tarmac. We could feel a joy coming out of the soil. There is something very blessed in this country. And I think you are very fortunate. I beg you not to lose this opportunity of being born here. When you look around you, you don't see many saints, I grant you, but the influence is there. And if you will tune into it, you know, the big thing that we need to do is get rid of this sense of I and mine. And the usual thought with that teaching is that, well, then I shouldn't do anything. I had that idea many years ago because my guru told me, when you lecture, let God speak through you. And I was in the middle of a lecture on Sunday morning in Hollywood Church when I suddenly thought, well, if God is to speak through me, maybe I should shut up and let him speak. So for 2 minutes, that's a long time when you've got a large crowd, I didn't say anything. And people were perspiring, thinking I had frozen with fright. But in fact, I was just calmly waiting to see if God would say something through me. He didn't. He didn't say a single word. And I came to understand that we must do it. My guru put it this way: "I will reason, I will act, but guide thou my reason, will, and activity in the right way." Now, how do you do this? It's very good and very helpful to try to get rid of the sense of I and mine. It's essential. It's what the spiritual path is all about. But what are you going to do it with? The sense of I and mine. How are you going to do it any differently? What we're trying to accomplish is oneness with the true self. This ego is the soul's false self. And my guru told a story about a man who was being disturbed by a demon. And he read something in the Shastras that incantation, if you chant this mantra and cast it on the person, he won't be able to touch you. And so the man chanted this mantra and threw it on the demon. And the demon laughed. He said, "Ha ha, before you could even even chant that mantra over this powder, I myself got into the powder." And what this means, Master said, is that the very ego with which we must dispel this delusion is already captivated by that delusion. We're in its grip. How do you do it? Well, the only thing is whatever you do, try to feel inspiration. I've had a lot of people say, "I feel inspired to tell you so and so," and it's a lot of nonsense. But you do feel, when you meditate, you feel a certain peace, a certain joy. Try to act from that peace. Try to act with that peace. I've had lots of experiences with this idea, with this concept. I remember many years ago, Warner Books in New York wanted to publish a book of mine, and they asked me for a title. I suggested Meditation for Starters. And this was in June. The next April, I hadn't yet written the book because I'd had a heart operation. I'd had all sorts of trials and difficulties during that time. But in April, I began to think, now I must write it. But that subject is something that I could write, as you say, somebody fighting with his left hand tied behind his back. I could write that with my left hand tied behind my back, you might say. And in April, Warner editors wrote to me and said, no, they wanted another subject altogether, superconsciousness. Well, superconsciousness is not a subject I could write with my hand tied behind my back. That is a deep subject. And I said, well, how long will you give me? They said, this was April, mind you, they said till the end of June. Thank you. You know, when I gave a talk at the Mahasamadhi at the Bristol Hotel, somebody's phone rang. And I said, we told you, please don't leave your phone on. It kept ringing. Finally, I realized it was in my own pocket. It was somebody phoning from America, so I just turned it off. So now I have no right to scold anybody. Anyway, they gave me till the end of June. Well, I had 2 weeks already committed to giving a lecture tour. So that gave me essentially 2 months. Meanwhile, Derek Bell, who is the most famous harpist in Ireland, was, I should say, he's dead now, he wrote to me in May saying that he wanted to do an album of my music. And, you know, it's no joke to just... Have you got 2 of them? Just turn it off, that's the spirit. It's no joke to... he wanted Celtic music, and I hadn't written any Celtic music. But the same thing has applied, that when I have tried to write music for a specific country, I just ask for the answer, and suddenly it's there. How, I don't know, but I do know that this is how it works. And so, yes, how I do know is something I can share with you up to a point. In this case of superconsciousness, I had to really put my mind on it. I gave those 2 weeks of lectures, then I turned off my phone. I refused to see any mail. I refused to have anybody visit me. I just closed the door and put myself in that state which would enable me to write this book. So I had figured that this subject would take 2 years to write such a book. Minimum 1 year if I really applied myself, and they were giving me less than 2 months, about a month and a bit. And so I just had to say, God, I can't do it. You have to do it. And I asked my Guru to do it through me. And with that, and this is what I'm trying to help you to understand to the extent that I'm able to understand it and able to convey it, that instead of saying it's difficult, I believe in solution consciousness. In this case, I didn't think it's difficult. I thought I can do it, I must do it, and the answer is, and I just sort of plunged myself into it. You know, I got the book written, and it's one of my best books. Not my book, however, but I got it off in the mail, so they got it at the end of June, just when they wanted it. Then, because of Derek Bell's request, I had told him I just really didn't see how I could. I don't know music for the harp. I've never written any. And he wrote back and said, you can. And what was I to say? I didn't want to get into a battle of you can, I can't, you can, I can't. So I found myself at the end of June, still in a superconscious state. So I asked for melodies, and in 2 days I had them all. 1 or 2 former melodies I had written that fitted, and the rest I had to write. Then I had 1 day to pack for my tour, another tour that I had to do, and then I left. Then I came back from that tour and polished up the melodies a little bit for Derek Bell. But when you put yourself in tune and don't let that I can't consciousness come into your mind, that's the trick. You must not allow your mind to say I can't. There is one thought that will help you. You can't do anything, but he can do everything. And so why not give him a chance? If you, many times I have seen that when I say, well, I don't know how to do it, but he can, and plunge into it, I have not made a fool of myself yet. There's still time, but try it. You'll see that if you meditate and feel his consciousness, and then with that consciousness, you don't say, God, give me the answer. There was a story about a group of students from different countries who were invited to, or required to, write an essay on the camel. And the German went to the local library and read up on camels. And the Englishman went to the zoo and looked at a camel in the zoo. The American, barring all expenses, went to Egypt and got camels and rode them and so on to learn about it. And the Indian locked his door, closed his blinds, sat in the middle of the floor and prayed for an essay to be dropped in his lap. That is not the way. You can't wait passively and say, God, give it to me. But the interesting thing is that if you do your best and allow him to do it through you, rather than say, what do I want? And I've had this experience, especially in writing music. I remember I was going with a couple of friends of mine to give a concert, and it was on my own music at our retreat in Ananda village. And as I was going to the door, I said, it's strange, but you know, I have only to put my mind on a country, and suddenly the music seems to come to me. I said, for instance, let me just go to the piano and see if I can find something of Japan. And I sat at the piano and put my fingers on the keynotes and said, all right, let's have a melody. And it came out beautifully. I've called it Cherry Blossoms in Kyoto. La 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 la. La 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 la. La 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 la. La 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 la. La 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 la. La 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 la, etc. But Very Japanese. A friend of ours who lived many years in Japan said, that's just perfect. I don't know Japanese music. But you see, God is there. You can't do it. But don't say, therefore, you can't do it. He can do anything you need to do through you. And with that, I've been able to build this community. It's a simple secret. There's really no problem to it. All you have to do is have the faith. And most people are a little hesitant to make fools of themselves. I guess I'm not enough hesitant. But I found that it does work, because things that I don't know anything about, somehow the answers have been given me. And this I tried to do when I was here in India before, back in the early 1960s, in fact 59, when Rajendra Bij came to my first initiation in Delhi. And I was told that it was impossible to get land in Delhi. Everybody else had priorities over ashrams. Nehru was sort of not anti-religion necessarily, but yeah, anti-religion. And ashrams had less priority: schools, colleges, hospitals, businesses, everything. And so I talked to a Mr. Ratti, who was the finance minister of Delhi State, and he told me it's ridiculous even to think of getting land here. And so I said, by my will, it will happen. And I put all my energy into visiting different ambassadors and different chief ministers and Moraji Desai and Jagjivan Ram, and one person after the other, Radha Krishnan. Finally, I began to get a picture of what was, you know, if you want to convince people, you have to talk in terms of what they want. It doesn't interest them what you want. But I finally understood what they want. And I wrote to Bhagavan Sahaya, who was the Chief Commissioner of Delhi State. And I said to him, look, I know what you want with that Greenbelt area. I had decided that if I can't get any land, I want land exactly where I want it. And that was, that was right opposite Mandir Lane from Birla Mandir, which is in the center of the city nearly. It was an amazing, I mean, if you want to be stupid, you might as well go ahead and be stupid. And so I decided that's where I wanted it, the least probable place. But it was beautiful. So I said, that's where I want this land. And I wrote Bhagavan Sahaya, I said, look, I know why you want it, why you have this rule of a green belt. It's necessary. You need lungs for the city, you need greenery, you need a jungle even. But the trouble is that what you've got is a wasteland. Sand, rocks, a few scrubby plants, and nothing else. I said, even a city as big and rich as New Delhi will never be able to make green those thousands of acres that you're calling the green belt. So it's not serving any purpose right now except as a public latrine. And so anyway, he wrote to me and said he wanted to see me. So I went and visited him and talked a little bit, and he liked the idea very much. I said that if you have your Buddha Jayanti Park, that's a beautiful place, but no one's going to go to a park that doesn't have some sort of building, a restaurant, for example. And with that, they've been able to build a beautiful green area in the midst of all that waste. So he liked that idea. He said, I could convince the other commissioners, but since this idea for a green belt has come from the very top, Nehru himself will have to give his approval. Well, that was like, well, I said to him, well, then good, you go to him. He said, no, you have to go. That was like saying, go to the moon, then we can talk. And so anyway, a friend of mine had a friend, she was a Kashmiri Brahmin, and this lady was a Kashmiri Brahmin who was a cousin of Nehru. So I went to this lady, and she agreed to put a good word in for me with Indira Gandhi. And so I went to Indira Gandhi, who was only seeing me out of obedience to this auntie of hers. But she said, please be quick. I have to go to a conference in Paris tomorrow, and I'm packing. I said, oh, do you speak French? She said, yes. So I spoke French with her. And This warmed her a little bit. I said, "Where did you learn French?" She said, "Oh, you'd never have heard of it." I said, "Well, try me." She said it was in the school called Beau Soleil in a little village called Villars, nobody's ever heard of. I said, "I went to school in just the next village, Chazière, and we used to walk by your school every day." Well, at this she melted. And so we talked quite a while. And she took me out and showed me a garden and so on. And then she said, well, she would talk to her father. And Nehru, the day that he did see me, and the day he saw me, he had lost a very dear friend, and he was more philosophical than usual. And we talked for 40 minutes. And he said, well, I like your idea, and I will go and see the land. And he saw the land, walked it, and said, yes. Now that's a miracle. And it came from absolutely putting it in God's hands and not waiting for God to do it. We have to do our bit, and in this case, it took a lot of bit to make it happen. But he did give permission. The one thing I didn't do was I didn't put my mind on my own organization. And they were just horrified that I had done something like this. They didn't have the courage to realize what a wonderful thing it would be for us, for Delhi, for India, for everything. They couldn't see that, and they just threw me out on my ear. Really, it was quite a trauma in my life. I was the vice president. Even so, they did that. I don't regret it now. I did regret it then. It was an intense time of suffering. But then I found that it enabled me to do the very things my guru had told me I should do. And so I have done them since then. This was in 1962. And here I have built, with his help and God's grace, I have built this thing. Now, all of this happened by saying I can. Now, a lot of people will try to stop you. They will say, no, you can't. And they will say you're being egotistical. Well, it's not you who are doing it. He can do anything. I can't do anything, but he can do it. And that's the important thing, that if you have that kind of faith, that you will see that his guidance can be yours in anything that you need to do. It may be in your business, it may be in your home, but there is no problem. You know, the American Indians, they're called Indians falsely, but I don't know what else to call them. Columbus thought he'd discovered India, and all he did was discover America. Anyway, they have this idea, this concept, that if there's a poisonous herb, nearby there will be growing its antidote. And the Jagadguru Shankaracharya told us something when he came to America, for this is the one from Govardhan Math in Puri. And he told me, he said that if you are bitten by a cobra, now mind you, I don't want to recommend this. He said, however, that if you're bitten by a cobra, in the tail of the cobra there's antivenom. If you will bite the tail, you will be able to suck on that, and nobody's ever proved it to me. I don't know if it's true, but it is a fact of nature that wherever there is something negative, there is also something positive. Wherever there's a problem, in this case is what we're talking about, there is a solution. There is always a solution to every problem. But you must approach it with not with problem consciousness, with solution consciousness. And you know that so many people, they come to you and they talk about all the difficulties, and why I can't do that, and why that can't happen, why... they'll never get anywhere. One woman came to my guru for consultation, and she began talking about the pains and harrowing experience of an operation she had had. And he thought, my goodness, this must have happened a week ago. He said, when did this happen? She said, 20 years ago. For 20 years she'd been living in this pain of memory, of all the suffering and everything. It's just not worth it. I had open heart surgery. They replaced a valve, which is a big operation. And I can't say I chose this, but I had to do it. There was a book of mine at a printer, and I had to do this. It wasn't my choice. The doctor told me I had to have the operation or I could die any day. So I went in there, but there was a book of mine at the printer, and they were waiting to print it for me to edit the preface, which somebody had written, but said you do the editing. And the day of the operation, I edited the first half, but I couldn't finish. The day after the operation, I had to finish this blasted thing. I had to sort of shake all the fogs of anesthesia from my brain and dive in and finish that preface. God just somehow, when He sees that you're willing, don't expect Him to say, okay, I won't give you any difficulties. He does give you difficulties. I'll never forget that very morning. I mean, the operation ended about 6:30 in the evening. 3 o'clock that morning, somebody, a jokester, he thought he was having fun, burst open the door, blood, I need blood. Can you imagine such a person? He was just coming to take an injection of blood, but to do it, I said, don't talk like that. I've just undergone major surgery. This is not a time for joking. I must say, I've been in the hospital here. I like the nurses. They're very sweet. They knock on the door before they enter. And I think this hospital here that we've gone to, the Privat, is the best hospital I've ever been in. In America, nurses come into your room bustling and sort of telling you what's what. Here they don't, and it's much more easy to work with them when they want to work with you rather than tell you what to do. This is what I'm trying to say is that if you want solutions, then don't worry about the problems. God will give you problems, and the more sincere you are, the more problems you will have. If you will look, I know it's not what you want, but let's just ask one question. What do you want? If you want joy, you won't find it until you find Satchidananda. And you won't find Satchidananda until you work out all the karmic obstacles that are there trying to keep you from attaining it. And there is a force there that tries to keep you from climbing up that mountain, you might say, symbolically. And anybody who has attained anything really worthwhile in life, he's had to work for it. If you really want an easy life, okay, but don't expect to accomplish anything. And yes, there are people whose lives are easy, but it's much easier to have the consciousness that it's not difficult. I know when my life has been so full of these things that I just take it for granted. It doesn't mean anything to me, but I remember I said to somebody, we were talking about different people's lives and the troubles they've had. And I said, it's strange, I don't seem to have any troubles at all. And she said, my God, in the year I've known you, your temple burned down, the trustees tried to take your land away from you, you had all these oppositions in this way and that way. I said, I guess so. But when the temple burned down, I went into a shop that day and I was singing a song. And the shopkeeper said, you're singing? I said, why not sing? I've lost my temple, I haven't lost my voice. But the thing is, why get excited and pulled down just for little things that happen? It doesn't matter. You will find that if you have a good attitude, somehow everything comes out fine. And this world you can't expect happiness in this world. You get little glimpses of it. It's like the clouds which clear away and then you see a little bit of sun and suddenly there's rain again. And some people have an easier life than others. I would say don't worry about that aspect of it. If God gives it to you, fine. No, and you don't want to invite trouble. But if you really want God, understand that there will be tests. Understand that there will be difficulties. And understand that it's a strong willpower and not just, God, you do it for me, that will enable you to accomplish. Now, in your daily life, because I don't expect that every time you go to the office you're going to have a problem. Every time you sit down and try to cook a meal, you're going to have a problem. I don't think that that's necessarily the thing. In fact, I think that people who have too many troubles are probably inviting them also. You don't want to have problem consciousness. That puts out a kind of magnetism that attracts trouble. Have the consciousness that everything is a part of God's plan and it will work out well. But you will see that if you let that Okay, meditate and feel his peace in your heart. And with that peace, try to act. And you will see that if you can do it with his consciousness, that somehow it's like a muscle. You have to use it to develop it. So you have to use your intuition and never say, oh, I know because my intuition tells me, because you can make many mistakes that way. But bit by bit, you will see that that guidance will come to you. And it will come more and more, the more you call upon it. So what you need to do, and this is the other side of that coin, you might say, of not having ego when you act. You don't want to have the thought, I'm doing it. But do have the thought that with his power I can do anything. This is it's a hard thing to explain, but it works. That's all I can say. I know that I'm remembering a time when I was at a meeting. I'd been invited to be one of the speakers at a big convention. And there were other speakers there, and many of them were famous people. And I invited them all out to dinner one night, a group of them. And they were all talking to each other and totally ignoring me. And I was sort of surprised at first. First of all, partly because maybe I'm somewhat known. Secondly, because I was the host. And I thought, this is delightful. To be totally unimportant and enjoy it. That's very nice. And so I had a good time that evening. And yeah, I paid the bill and everything, but it was fine. If you can enjoy your own unimportance, if other people ignore you, if they don't respect you or anything, enjoy it. But the other side of that is that when you have to do something, say, I'm nobody, what can I do? You're everybody. You're a child of God himself. And there is nothing that he can't do through you if you will allow him. And that is not egotism. That is a part of learning how to make him the doer of everything. You can't do it, but he can do it through you if you will let him. This is a subtle point. It's not easy to get it across, but I'm hoping that it is somewhat clear to you, because I can say that that's how I've achieved what little success I have in this world. You know, nothing that man does can be important. The greatest emperor, what has he done? The people who were famous 20 years ago, 40 years ago, nobody's ever heard of them now. In London, there was the famous novelist that I enjoyed reading, Helen McGuinness. I don't know if you know her. She's not a spiritual novelist, but she writes very well, and it's nice entertainment. And she was the best in her field. And I went to she's English. I went to a London bookshop. They'd never heard of her. I went to several more. They'd never heard of her. Everything you can do, just a few years after you've gone, the waters will close again. Just don't think of trying to be important or known or anything like that. But during this little time that you're on earth, do try to do some good. Because not only will it give you good karma, but it can give you freedom too from all karma. If you allow him to act through you, then he will give you more and more of that freedom. Finally, what you do in this world really does not matter. There isn't anything you can do that is important. There's only one thing that is important: our relationship with God. Nothing else really matters. And all the incarnations you've lived, I've told you this before. It's a somewhat scary concept. Omar Khayyam in his Rubaiyat wrote one stanza which my guru explained as meaning that many souls who come out in the day of Brahma, who are manifested with the day of Brahma as human beings, are still wandering in delusion at the end of that day of Brahma. And the further thought occurs, well, how many days of Brahma can a person wander? He can wander as long as he wants to. It isn't God who wants to keep us in delusion, But we want to. We think, yeah, God, I do want you, but that looks pretty good to me. Oh, I would like to have this, or I hope to achieve that, and then I will be free. That then, like a survey made in America many years ago, asking people of the lowest income bracket to the highest income bracket, are you satisfied with what you have? The common answer was, well, we would be if we had 10% more. That 10% more explains why you're still wandering in delusion, why we're all still wandering in delusion. The only purpose of life is to understand that He is acting through you. He's dreaming this whole show. And one thing that is a wonderful thing to contemplate is that you've never heard or read of one who found God, of a saint, who said, what a pity this whole thing had to be done. They've all rejoiced in it. They've said that this is a wonderful plan of God's. They don't look back on the suffering and say, yes, but how you suffer. They say, what suffering? You know, in that state you see that it's all just gone like that. And you learned many lessons, and it was a great drama. And each person, if you could look back over your lives and over all the experiences that you've had, you would say, what an absolutely wonderful story. Every human being is the hero of the most wonderful romance ever written. And each one of us, when he achieves that, will say, oh, it was worth it. And the humblest beggar, the greatest emperor, there's no difference. That emperor can be a beggar in his next life. I remember seeing a group of beggars at Howrah many years ago, and there was a girl there who looked, I could not but believe that she had been a rich woman who was sort of thinking, what am I doing here, holding my hand out begging? She didn't feel right in that role, but she had been selfish, and therefore she had to be a beggar and learn. We all have to go through all these experiences. My guru wrote about how he had been an emperor, he had been a king, he had been a beggar by the wayside, ignored by everybody. We have been all those things. And when you think of all the countless lives you've lived to get where you are, the one thought that I recommend everybody having, and I think that it is probably why all of you are here, is saying, we've had enough. There comes a time, and some people need only a little bit of suffering, and it reminds them of all the suffering that they've ever had, even though it's subconscious, it's not dynamic to their consciousness. Nonetheless, there's that thought, I don't want any more. And some people need a lot of beating, but sooner or later, it is suffering that takes us to God. We need that suffering to convince us that the answers are not here. And when you touch a hot stove, your hand gets burned. You may think how cruel, but it protected your hand. It was part of God's plan that a hot stove would hurt you so you wouldn't destroy your hand. And so it is with suffering in this world. It has its purpose. Its purpose is to help you to say, no, not that direction, not that. And neti, finally you come to that point where you realize that there is only one answer, and that is to know that He became you. The ego is real. It's a real thing. It's not that you have to get rid of the ego. It's that you have to understand that we are all like little slivers of glass in the sunshine. And we shine because the sun shines on us. When the sun goes down, there's no light in that glass. When death comes, there's no more light in your body. But that life, that prana, which shines, illuminates you, and that consciousness of self, all of that comes from the Supreme Self. He became all these forms. He became you. And when we speak of self-realization, it's the realization of you, that little tiny sliver of glass, that suddenly realize, I'm shining with His light. And He's my reality, not this little body When you come to that, it's not, my Guru explained this state, that when you achieve divine consciousness, you understand that He is the whole reality, that it was only He all through those incarnations, but then you also know that He dreamed you. And that dream that is you will remain for eternity. That's the marvelous thing about this great drama. You never lose that sense of self. Even in the infinite self, as my Guru wrote in his poem Samadhi, I, the cosmic sea, behold the little ego floating in me. The little bit of wave, it remains there. So that, for instance, if you pray to Krishna and He appears, it isn't God taking that form only. It's that remembrance of God in that form activating itself. Yes, it's the infinite. When I looked into my Guru's eyes, he said, I killed Yogananda many lifetimes ago. He was an avatar in his life. He is one of a very few group of gurus who come back to this planet again and again to help us come out of this fog of delusion. But he still had, you looked into his eyes, you could see there was only God. But it was God in that form, so that he could say, yes, he was different great avatars in the past also. Lahiri Mahasaya could say that. All the great masters, they were those people. After being liberated, when you are liberated, God will not, if people call to you as your devotees, God will not take that form. It will be you yourself activating that form. This is the marvelous. It perplexes the mind, but you will never lose yourself. You will just understand that you are just a fragment of that infinite self that is the real self. You are He, and He will never forget having been you and you and you and each one of us. And it will always be that sense of, many saints even like to come down from that state so that they can recall again the worship of I and Thou. And so Shankaracharya, Adi, who was talking always of absolute non-duality, even he wrote poems of devotion to the Divine Mother. He could have said, well, who's the Divine Mother? Everybody's the Divine Mother, and written in the abstract, as many followers of his did, and they became dry. You need devotion. And so many saints come down from that state to show this beauty of I and Thou. The complexity of this universe just staggers the imagination. Finally, you just sort of say, God, I don't have any more questions. I just want you, and that's all. But you will see that nobody who ever found God said, oh, what a scam. Everyone who said, this is what it was all about. You don't find that in any other field. You don't find it in politics. You don't find it in literature. You don't find it in anything. People can be rich and they're not happy. Those who have God have what they were looking for, all those incarnations. Think of it. You know, in this age, we live in an age of experimentation. People like to try things and see if they work. What better experiment than this? Try to find who you really are. Love God. If so many people in every culture and every religion, every country, every age, have all said the same thing, there's got to be something in it. It's well worth a try. So I would say, I think it was Sukadeva who said it, but I'm not sure. All time is wasted that is not spent seeking God. Seek Him. Okay? Well, I've talked a little bit. Does anybody have an urgent question? Okay?
Brahma and Prakriti. Brahma and Prakriti, how are they related? And how do we fit in that relation?
The relationship between Prakriti and Brahma.
The undivided one, God and nature.
You know, you ask these questions, we ask these questions, thinking that we can understand the answer. I'll give you an answer. You won't understand it, nor will I. The fact is that that infinite one, it's a part of the nature of Satchidananda to want to enjoy itself through many. This is what the sages have told us. Hard to understand because you can't understand the motivation of somebody who has no motives. He's not a somebody even, he just is. There's no other. Anandamayi Ma used to say it is and it isn't and neither is it nor is it not. You figure that one out. So the thing is that the relationship is that he dreams this universe. His motives you can't understand any more than a little child can understand its father's motive for going to work. He has to earn money. Why? He has to pay for the bills. Why bills? He doesn't understand. And so how can we understand that? However, he has that's a part of his impulse, his creation. It's the nature of, if you want to put it this way, the nature of creativity to expand. And what's it to expand into? So it expresses itself. And so Prakriti dreams this great universe. It doesn't exist. It seems real. But science in our age has shown us that there's nothing solid at all. It's all, first of all, the space between the atoms of your body, which seems fairly solid. You put your hand on it, it won't go through it. But the space is equivalent to the distance between our sun and the nearest star, which takes 4 light years to reach us. That's a lot of space. And yet that space even doesn't exist. It's all vibrating energy. The way God created the universe was first of all dreaming it in idea. And he created a whole universe called the ideational or the causal universe. And when people reach that level, when the soul reaches that level, it can create whole universes. The extent of creation is just beyond belief, beyond conception. They can create these universes. God didn't create this universe, to tell you the truth. He created, infinite spirit created God. That is to say, he created that aspect of himself which would go on and create things. And so these highly evolved beings are a part of that manifestation. It all goes back to something that is the simplest thing of all. And that's why we can't understand it. If you could get back to that prime simplicity of no thoughts, no feelings, nothing except just Satchidananda, you would know it. That is the state that each one of us can have. And you know, it's not that difficult. What makes it difficult is the thought that, yeah, right, okay, however. And so the however is why we're in this room and why you're asking that question. But the truth is that the closer we come to that, the more we realize that it's really very simple. Everything I want is there. It isn't that, oh well, when I fulfill this desire I'll get it. You won't fulfill anything when you fulfill that desire. And so Prakriti is this great, you could call it Kali, Mahakali, with his arms of destruction, creation, preservation. This is the universe. It's Om. Kali is just a form. Om creates everything. This is why we sing Om in 3 forms. Om, Om, Om. Om is Brahma. It takes more energy to get something moving. You hear when a car starts like that, right? Then it's going, and that's Vishnu. And the vibration of that level of Om is a lower vibration. Then the vibration of Shiva, Nataraj, the dancer who destroys everything, that's the vibration of Om in its destructive, or not really destructive at all, but merging everything back into the spirit. And that is Shiva. And Shiva is not a destroyer except of delusion. That's why people worship him and they shouldn't fear him. But that is a lower sound, a very low vibration. And you hear that with a car motor, so it's a good example. But first of all, right, then it's going along the highway. Then finally it reaches its driveway and it... And so the low vibration, which is pulling it there. Those three vibrations are Prakriti. And we are a part of Prakriti. Now, you can worship the outer Prakriti, but it'll keep you on going forever. Whereas if you try to worship the inner Prakriti, then that aspect of Om will gradually draw him into yourself. This is why meditating on Om is very important in yoga. Okay? You know, I haven't been well. I don't think I want to talk much longer. So that's one question. And like in an auction, I'll say, going, gone. Okay. Thank you all for coming. Would you like to sing something with your choir? Let's do that. No, because my voice, that's why I'm not well. I have a sore throat.
So all the choir singers come?
We need Indians living with us. We need Indians singing with us. We've come to help you, and then you have to do it. This is what happened in Italy too, that in the beginning the Americans came and the Italians came as guests. Then bit by bit the Italians began to feel that this is our family. That's how I want all of you to feel. That, you know, a real blood family, what is it really? You find that brothers are fighting brothers and cheating each other of inheritance and all sorts of things go on in families. But when you have people who come together because they believe the same things, we have 1,000 people living in our different communities and there's so much harmony there and helping one another. This is a true family. So when you can come to the point of realizing that we are your family, which we are, then maybe you'll come and live with us because we want that. I think that 100 years from now, people will look back and say the most important thing happening in the world 100 years ago now was creating these communities where people could learn to live together in harmony, in peace, in brotherhood, and that can be the model for humanity. People do not have to live with terrorism and anger and hatred. They can live with kindness. It works. We've proved it in 37 years of our existence. We've proved that it does work. So do take it seriously. Okay.
Secret of laughter lies in the laughing, not in the search for joy. It's a swallow ringing on the wind, it's innocence in a boy. Joy will come to anyone whose soul has learned to fly. Joy will come to anyone whose soul has learned to fly. Joy in the giving, not in the gaining, grasp and you'll never sing. You can ring the world and still be poor, win peace and live like a king. Joy will come to anyone whose soul has learned to fly. Joy will come to anyone whose soul has learned to fly. Joy in the singing, not in the song sung, welcome but never crave. If you think that laughter lies in things, to things you'll be but a slave. Joy will come to anyone whose soul has learned to fly. Joy will come to anyone whose soul has learned to fly. Sing when the sunshine, sing when the rain falls, sing when your road seems strange. In the tempest seas, the lightning flash, and ride the winds of change. Joy will come to anyone whose soul has learned to fly. Joy will come to anyone whose soul has learned to fly.
Thank you all.